But we missed you. Everybody was asking about you.
No, stop it. Nobody was asking.
Yes, they were.
My final thoughts on this are going to be exactly what you're talking about.
Well, let's go there.
All right.
Well, how did you see eyebrows if you didn't see a face?
Just like
your eyebrows are on your face.
Just like Billy Idol. Eyes without a
Here's
face.
our new. We saw the list of what she had to drink that day. Like, oh my goodness, I learned new words, new vocabulary words from that.
So I'm going to rebut that a little bit, if you don't mind, and say...
That's what we're here for.
Okay.
That's what we're here for. We debate, baby.
Okay.
As always, everything we discuss is for entertainment and is speculation. Please like and subscribe, and definitely join our discussion in the comments. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello, I'm back.
Finally.
Finally back. And I have been listening to some YouTubers and trying to get myself caught up. And the one YouTuber that I've been listening to the most is you.
Ah!
So I have been catching up on your thought on things. We've had a few YouTube post discussions.
Oh, like the post hearing and everything?
No, post YouTube of your posts discussions about some of the things that you talked about. And so it's kind of good because yours was very factual. I thought you did a really good job and reading the documentation, kind of giving somewhat of your opinion, but I mean, you stayed a little closer to the middle than I really thought you would. But
that was your influence.
Oh, okay. But I thought they were really good. I thought you did a good job in putting that information out there, and I learned some things. There's some things that kind of moved me around a little bit. So we did have some discussions, and we thought, hey, let's get us back together. You covered a lot of ground and some of the stuff that you posted and some things you still have yet to post. So we thought, hey, let's get together and talk about some of those things.
Yes, so much has happened. First, they just dumped tons of documents on us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still not caught up. I just started reading, I think it was like the defendant's responses to the state. So that, like, the state gave their whole side, then the defense came back with their whole side, and I couldn't get caught up on that doing recordings. And then there was the hearing. And then the judge just came out today with some decisions about that hearing. So, yeah, there's been a lot going on.
A lot going on.
So, but we missed you. Everybody was asking about you.
No, stop it. Nobody was asking.
Yes, they were.
Nobody was asking.
But we do have like 8 hot topics that we think are the big ones. And we weren't sure if we should touch a little bit on all of them, but we're going to tackle one right now with the roommates and their text messages that were released, because to me that was a big reveal.
And let's talk about those 8 topics just real quickly, kind of as a quick overview, because we listed 8 things, right?
Yes.
And we're like, hey, should we put these in chronological order? Should we put them in order of importance? Should we put them in, I'm passionate about this one, you're passionate about that? And there is no order to really put this in. So it may seem random, but it is, I think, just kind of what we feel comfortable talking about first, and we'll talk about second, even though it may be out of order chronologically, or maybe this is a less important topic here, this one today, than maybe the one we do last. So.
We thought impactful. Like, what one's probably like the most impactful
right.
to us.
To us.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, all right. So I have the transcripts that were released with the roommates text messages, and the state released theirs first, and theirs was more narrative. Like, a lot of the information was inside of paragraphs and hard to see. So I don't know. The defense was claiming they left stuff out of theirs. So then I have the defenses, and they itemized it. It was easier to read. Like, here's the
Mhm.
time, here's who texted who. But the defense did say that the court must be aware of the excluded portions of the phone records, and that their case was that Brian Koberger asserts that the full record must be made available.
So just to be clear, this is the texting that took place right around a little bit before, maybe during, and after
that whole night.
that time. So it's not days before, anything like that. It's just specifically about this evening. And what you were going to do is you're going to read some of it, and then we were going to kind of maybe later on compare it to the PCA timeline.
Yes, because that was the big reveal to me. Like,
Gotcha.
didn't match. But yeah, we'll get to that. So I thought it was interesting that the defense said that they are providing a more complete but not exhaustive view of the two surviving roommates, Dylan and Bethany's communications and interactions because it wasn't just texting, it was all social media
Right.
that they were using that night. So it looks like when they say that this is not exhaustive, that there's still more out there.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so the night of November 13th at 2:10, Dylan texts EG, who was the private driver that night, inquiring if he was driving. He texts back 3 minutes later saying yes, he was driving. At 2:53, Maddie calls Bethany. At 3:51, and I just want to note there's a whole hour break there. Dylan creates a new contact in her phone. Then at 4:19, Bethany calls Dylan. At 4:20, Dylan calls Xana. At 4:20, 20 seconds later, Dylan calls Kaylee. 8 seconds later, Dylan calls Bethany for 41 seconds. 4:21, Bethany calls Xana. 50 seconds later, Dylan calls Maddie. 4:22, Bethany calls Maddie. 4:22, Bethany calls Ethan. And then 8 seconds later, Dylan texts Bethany. No one is answering. 3 seconds later, Dylan texts Bethany. I'm really confused right now. Then Dylan texts Kaylee and just says, Kaylee. Dylan texts Kaylee, what's going on? BF has an outgoing message that's a Snapchat at 4:23. That's all it says, Snapchat. Bethany texts Dylan, yeah, dude, WTF. Bethany texts Dylan, Xana was wearing all black. Dylan texts Bethany, I'm freaking out right now. Dylan texts Bethany, no, it's like ski mask almost. Bethany texts Dylan, STFU, shut the F up. Bethany to Dylan, actually. Dylan to Bethany, like he had, and then these are all mixed up. It looks like something over his forehead and little around mouth. And then Dylan to Bethany, I'm not kidding. I'm so freaked out. Now we're at 4:24. This is all within like 1 minute, 2 minutes. Bethany to Dylan, so am I. Dylan to Bethany, phone is going to die. F. Bethany to Dylan, come to my room. And then she says, run. And then she says, down here. Those are all different text messages. And then Dylan calls Ethan. And then at almost 4:25, Dylan texts Bethany, but it doesn't say anything. And then Bethany to Dylan, and it doesn't say anything. And then at 4:27, Dylan has an outgoing call. At 4:27, she has an outgoing Snapchat message. 10 seconds later, she has an outgoing Snapchat message. 7 seconds later, Dylan calls Kaylee. Then she calls Xana. Then Bethany calls Maddie. Then Bethany calls Maddie. Then Bethany calls Kaylee. Then she calls Kaylee again. Then Dylan texts Kaylee. And then at 4:34, Bethany accessed Snapchat. It's crazy. 4:37, Bethany accessed Instagram. Then there's a break till 7:30 in the morning. So Bethany calls her dad at 7:30. Then she calls her dad again at 8:00. Then she calls her mom. Oh, no, she calls another number at 8:00. Then at 8:01, she calls home. At 8:02, she calls her mom. At 8:02, dad calls her back. At 8:05, from 8:05 to 10:00, Dylan's on Instagram. So almost 2 hours. She's on Instagram. 8:41 to 8:42, Bethany takes photos. I have to remember that. 9:04, mom texts Bethany. 10 to 10:01, Dylan messages incoming and outgoing Snapchats. Then Dylan's on Instagram. Dylan's on Indeed. Dylan messages, says incoming and outgoing Snapchats. That's from 10:04 to 10:23 in the morning. 10:23, Dylan texts Maddie. 10:24 to 10:25, she's on Instagram again. 10:30 to 10:45, she messages incoming and outgoing Snapchats. And then JM texts Bethany. And not sure who that is. I'm not sure. 10:56 to 11:29, Dylan's on Instagram. 11:29, Dylan texts Kaylee. 11:29, Dylan's on Instagram. Dylan's on Yik Yak. Dylan's on TikTok. Now we're at 11:37. Dylan's messaging Snapchat. 11:39 to 11:40, Dylan and her dad text. And I thought that JM was her dad's initials. I could be wrong about that. Bethany calls JM. 11:50, JM texts Dylan. 11:44 to 11:50, Dylan's on Instagram. 11:50, Dylan calls her neighbor, the female neighbor that was on the 911 call. And then 11:51, JM texts Dylan. And then pretty soon they're going to be making the 911 call. But at 11:51, Bethany texts JM. JM texts Bethany. JM texts Bethany. Bethany texts JM. JM texts Bethany. Bethany texts JM. Bethany texts JM. Bethany texts JM. Now we're at 11:54. JM texts Bethany, 3 texts. 11:54 to 11:57, Dylan's on Instagram. And then finally at 11:56, Bethany calls 911. So to me, that was way different than what the PCA said. Right?
Not different. What do you mean different?
So in the PCA, it said that Dylan was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by Kaylee playing with their dog upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
But she was on her phone all night.
Yeah, but it is the middle of the night. You know, you're saying there's no time that she was asleep. In her testimony, it says, I couldn't remember if I was sleeping or if it was real. So she's admitting to dozing off at some point. So it could have been. I mean, it doesn't mean that the PCA is wrong or different, right?
It does mean it's wrong if they say she was sleeping. This is their affidavit. Like, we have proven this. This is what happened according to our evidence. And, you know, they have this evidence and they're saying Dylan was asleep in her bed until getting woke up at 4 a.m. And that's not clearly what happened. I mean, I was blown away by this. Like, what? Because, you know, we've all been talking about it online. Like, you know, so you got woken up and then, you know, just speculating about the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, she was on her phone from 2:00 in the morning till there were breaks. Like, I pointed them out as I was reading it, but
which could have been sleep.
But I think it's a big deal that they're putting false information in a PCA, in an affidavit. That's a big deal. You don't have anything to
That's your
defend that?
That's your opinion. I mean, they're going by the testimony they had at the time, right? And the testimony at the time didn't come from, you know, George, came from her,
Oh, so for her word. So
from her
now we know
words.
her word wasn't
Yeah,
good.
and she even admits, she's like, "Look, I don't know what's the truth and what's the lie because I don't know what was a dream. I don't know what was real." Like she 100% didn't say this is complete fact. She's absolving herself in a way and saying, "Look, this night was so crazy. I couldn't remember if I was awake or asleep." She's spoken to that, right? I mean, I get it. I mean, do we want this to be clean and, like you were asleep or you were awake? You know, if it's better or worse for the Brian Koberger or not, I don't know. I mean, should we absolve whomever the person is that committed this crime because one of the people that were giving a statement could or could not have been asleep at a certain time? I don't think so, but
Well, I think it's more important.
Mhm.
The PCA was written in December.
December. Yep.
Okay. So they had all that time. They got the phone records and all of that. They
Mhm.
did a phone dump, so
Mhm.
they definitely had the roommates' information.
Mhm.
So I see your point that from her, and she was interviewed 4 or 5 times.
Mhm.
They're taking her account of things, but they
Mhm.
were able to verify. So to put that in there is still seems weird. Like they could have looked and been like, "Well, she's telling us she was asleep until 4 a.m." Like, no, she wasn't. She's
She
making all these text messages and phone calls.
Well, you say that with a strong bit of confidence, and I understand that, but that's not what she said. What she said was, "I don't know if I was asleep or awake. It was a very confusing night. A lot of things happened. I don't know if it was a dream. I don't know if this is a lie. I can't remember." So I think what they're taking is some of her actual statement. And I think what they were put in the PCA was pieces of her statement that probably all didn't fit nicely together, but yeah, made the PCA flow a little bit better, right? So you can get the arrest warrant. If someone who's in the house said, "Hey, I was awoken by some noise upstairs that made me call out to say, hey, knock that off," or whatever, and make me look out the door a few times, you know, maybe she was just laying in bed doing, texting or whatever, but something grabbed her attention, right? At some point, and that's where they put that in the PCA.
I can let her off the hook based on what you're saying at that time. We saw the list of what she had to drink that day. Like, oh my goodness, I learned new words, new vocabulary words from that. But I can't let law enforcement off the hook for that is a sworn affidavit. Like we are saying this is the truth.
To that point, in the PCA, the statements that are in there are in quotation marks. The police didn't say that. She said it. I could be wrong about that. So I'd like to see the PCA where that happened, but
Okay, so I had to go grab the PCA. And in it says DM stated she originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the southeast side of the second floor. DM stated she was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by what she stated sounded like Gonsalves playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms, which were located on the third floor.
okay.
So it's not her quote. So we can't really say she's quoted.
So in the PCA, they're taking a statement and using that statement to kind of show everything, right? Because they talk about the car, they talk about the bushy eyebrows, they talk about the video surveillance, they talk about the K-bar knife, or the DNA on it. I mean, so they talk about a
The
lot of
sheath.
the sheath. They talk about a lot of things, right? But the way you said it, and I'm not trying to be accusatory here, I'm trying to understand what the way you were saying it was. The police put in something in the PCA that was false to try to get an arrest. And I'm saying, I think they were just taking a statement, you know, probably they have 5,000 words from Dylan that night, but those 25 make that valuable for the PCA. Is that correct?
So, okay, I had a couple points. So, first of all, this was a weird PCA to begin with, or affidavit to begin with, because most places will just be like, facts, facts, facts. This was very narrative, lots and lots of extra information in there. Usually they're just a couple pages. And this was, I don't know, 12, 18. I think it was 18 pages long. So, it was almost like, too much, right? When you say thou doth protest too much, they're putting so much information in there. And I keep saying this was back in December. Like, this was in December. So and who do you rule out first? Those roommates had to be cleared first. They were in the house. Like, they were the ones in the house. So I would think they would have looked at their phone records and where were they and where were these text messages. And it's not right to put something in a legal document that you should have been able to verify before that's not true.
So,
because you can't be sleeping and texting on your phone. That's why I'm saying, it can't be true.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. So let's take the document where you read every single thing that happened.
Yes.
So let's compare. So use the defense one,
Mhm.
right? Because that's easier to read.
Yes.
And tell me what happened 10 minutes before and 10 minutes after 4:00. Just read that
Okay.
and the time.
Well, at 3:51, so that's 10 minutes before, Dylan created a new contact in her phone.
Okay.
And then there isn't anything for 30 minutes. So she fell asleep for 30 minutes.
All right. You just okay. Wait, time out. So, but I want to give you your due here, because you did say that the defense is arguing that not all the information is in here, right?
Yes.
There still could be something between 9 minutes before and, what you said, I think 30 minutes after the 4:00 hour that they talk about in the PCA.
And we could go back a little bit, because at 2:10 she texts the driver, 2:13. So we don't know anything from her from 2:13 to 10 minutes before 3. So she did say approximately. So she woke up and had to put a phone number in her phone. Because that's what happened at 3:51.
Yeah.
So I woke up because I'm hearing,
Yeah.
horrible sounds coming from above me, and I'm putting a contact in my phone.
Well, I don't see it that way, because I don't think the time frame of the actual crime is that 9 minutes before 4. Correct?
What time do you think the crime was?
I believe they said sometimes after 4 to 4:20.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's like the range that they're trying to give. So 10 minutes before that happened, she, there's many things that we can speculate. And we said we might speculate at the end of this episode of what happened, but you're pretty insistent on the fact that they have these records, right? They've shown them to the public. And you're saying that based on all these records that they've shown to the public, it does not match the PCA. And I'm saying, yes, it does. I mean, there's a good narrative around all that, but specifically the PCA is not, based on that information, has not been falsified. Now give me something else.
Yeah,
and
I'll
I could
just say that they led everybody to believe that, oh, we were just sleeping peacefully in our beds and then we were woken up, right? That's what
There's
that
a lot of
intention
led to
seems
believe.
like.
There's a lot of led to believe in this case, trust me. But I don't disagree with the fact, because you started this by saying the defense is concerned that there are certain things that are still redacted
Yeah, I would think
or have
they
not
know, but yeah, we don't know.
that have not been released.
Right.
So they may know a little bit more than what we know, and it may be, and it may be at 3:59, 4:00, 4:01. A lot of stuff was going on, and she was saying she was sleeping. I can fall asleep in 30 seconds. I see you fall asleep every night in less than a minute. So to say that, oh, it's going to take me a while every night, as soon as you do your little shimmy and okay, I'm in my comfortable spot, you'll get something on TV ready to watch. You don't even get a minute into that show and you're asleep. So
True.
but I do want to leave it open to the fact that the defense is saying there's more information. Why would they say that? Maybe because there's an issue with the PCA and there's more information that we don't know about. So I'm holding my judgment. But right now, based on everything that we have, how you kind of started this is not, I don't think is true. So I'm going to rebut that a little bit, if you don't mind, and say
that's what we're here for.
Okay.
That's what we're here for. We debate, baby.
Okay. All right. That's good. I want to do it in the lovingest way possible because I love you.
No, I understand. So this does stand out to me, though, that there's this 1 hour from after Dylan texts the driver and he texts back, and after Maddie calls Bethany, that stands out to me. That stands out to me that Kaylee and Maddie were texting the ex-boyfriend, and then Maddie reaches out to Bethany, and then there's nothing for an hour.
Well, I think they were frantic about something else. They didn't know what was going to happen. If they did, they would have barred the door, right?
Just that there's this hour. Okay. So there's an hour where nothing's going on. So it could be everybody crashed out and was sleeping for an hour. Or that could be the time of the crime. That could be like, they originally did say that the time of the crime was 3 to 4 a.m. A lot of things have been changed in this. Even when you said like 4 to 4:20, I believe they backed it up a few minutes because they were matching it up with what time they saw the car leaving the neighborhood. So, yeah, a lot of things have been adjusted.
And what I was saying was with the phone call of Kaylee and Maddie, they were frantically calling the ex-boyfriend, right? And then they called Bethany.
Just Maddie called Bethany.
Yeah,
one call.
So yeah, so there was like a whole bunch of these frantic calls, and then maybe it was like, we can speculate, right? That's what we're going to do at the end, is speculate, what could have happened. I don't know. I don't think it has anything to do with anything that happened at the time of the crime. I won't even say the time. The time of the crime, I don't think it has anything to do with what happened at the time of the crime.
I just thought it was weird because you can see Maddie on that grub truck video and she was really intoxicated, and I would just think you would like go home, hit your bed, and be passed out.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways. I've seen
that's true.
I've seen them pass out, and I've seen them just, I'm gonna keep going. No, I can't talk anymore.
It does go both ways.
It does go both ways. Yeah. So I guess a quick recap, because I think we're moving into maybe post murder and what was going on. So we wanted to compare the PCA, right, to the timeline of the text messages and things that were going on and how it affects the case, right? That was a big talking point for us. I think on this one, I think the PCA is okay right now until we learn a little bit more. I kind of want to get your final stamp on what you think based on what you've read, because that was a big talking point for us. And I want to make sure we're on at least we're somewhat on the same page currently.
I don't see anybody really relying on anything that's in that PCA anymore. Even the prosecution, like the lead prosecutor at one point, probably like last year or something, said, well, that's irrelevant. And I don't know if that's because so much more information has come out since then.
Well,
but everybody, I think, pretty much agrees on that.
Agrees on what?
Both sides. That like people that are on the defense side, that it doesn't look like they have the right guy. They say the PCA is, garbage. People that think they do have the right guy stick to that. But the prosecutor even did say, like, we're not even really, it's irrelevant. Those were the words. Irrelevant.
When there was implied improprieties that the PCA was written and being used under false pretenses, the PCA was relevant, and we were going to show what those improprieties were. Now that these so-called improprieties on the timeline of the text messages that have just been released, that we're going to show that the PCA shouldn't have been written that way, show evidence that it shouldn't have been written that way. And then we just personally walked through it and showed that it doesn't show that at all. Now the PCA becomes an irrelevant document. So
not according to me.
Oh, okay.
According to the prosecution.
Okay. And you said everybody. I think you said everybody.
Well, yeah, it's garbage.
Okay.
You wait till you see the comments that we get in the video. Yeah, they'll say it.
So,
Garbage.
but we were willing to use the PCA kind of tightly wind it up and start whacking people with it because, hey, we've arrested somebody because of something that was wrong. And one of the wrong things that we were going to prove here today, you and I, was that these text messages were going to disprove what they wrote in the PCA. And that is not to be true. That is not true.
I am going to say that that's true because they led everyone to believe that they were just sleeping, that she was just sleeping and woke up at 4 a.m. And up until, for 2 years thinking that's, they were sleeping. We had no other information. What was it was all just wondering, just wondering. And then having this come out weeks ago, I was just like, what? Like, I think a lot of us suspected or thought, like, I don't know. I guess I would say wasn't surprised.
I wasn't surprised either.
Wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
But I guess also surprised that, wow, like a lot of people have been doing a lot of talking and speculating and what if and what could have been.
Mm-hmm.
And then to see, like, they weren't just awake, they were communicating, and there have been one student that I know of from that area that said he was in these Snapchat groups.
I heard that early on.
Well, when that happened, when that person came out, you're like, is this person verify it? Like, are they trustworthy? Can you believe what they're saying? Like, is this really a real, because there's people out there that just troll, and pretend things. So, that now you look back and go, wow, maybe those kids did know early, because he was saying that Snapchats went out in the morning before they called 911, and a lot of college kids knew that something had already happened. And now this looks like that's true.
100% agree.
Okay, well,
I don't know why you're convincing me on something I'm already convinced on. What I'm saying is we were going into this episode stating that the PCA was erroneously written because they had all their text messages, and based on that, they put false information in the PCA. And I'm going to say it just this last time, lovingly as I possibly can, that narrative based on the information that we have today is not true. That the PCA thus far.
Well, we understand your point. That's your point. That's your.
No, that's not.
You're asking me to agree to something.
That's not a point. That's a fact. That's literally what happened. That's literally what happened.
Okay.
All right.
We don't know literally that she woke up at 4 a.m. from a dog barking. We don't know that. That's not on video. We
Right.
don't know that.
Right.
So you
right.
can't say that.
What we can say is that the statement that they use in the PCA from the witness has not been disproven by the text messages that were released by the defense. That's my point. The next part of this was, you've read the transcripts. I'm more interested because this is relatively new and not much of a point counterpoint, conspiracy, non-conspiracy, fraudulent cops, not fraudulent cops, like that debate always kind of gets us a little bit. What I want to discuss is all that stuff that happened afterwards. Like, what's your thoughts on how they reacted to all this? I have my personal thoughts, but what are your thoughts? And after this, they're kind of freaked out.
You mean after 4:20 in the morning?
After 4:20, yeah, that's the part that I don't think. All this other stuff is like, well, he's guilty, he's not guilty, and this is a corrupt cop, this is not a corrupt. Like, I don't, that stuff. Oh, I'm so over some of that. But this is kind of, if this narrative is complete or near complete, I'm curious what you think about how they acted in that moment, and what do you think you would have done? And do you think this is appropriate? Do you think this is, they kind of sold their friends short by the way they acted here? What's your thought? I guess is what I mean. You read it well, so I'm still familiar, but what's your thought on all that?
Well, just to answer that, I mean, they're clearly concerned about something, right?
What though? What do you think that they're concerned about? What do you think they thought happened?
Maybe they knew that one of them was in trouble, like about something with some bad people, like with some bad people.
Okay.
And they were gonna get, a talking to, or a scare, or a threat, or
Okay.
something like that.
Yep.
But not what happened. What happened.
Okay.
And so in my mind, that would be like, okay, well, they're not answering, but not thinking that they're not alive anymore.
Right.
I've always thought that, like, that's always been my, like, that they, and just, can I add, looking at these, because I'm looking at these times, and it's a narrow window, right? They're saying for like 4 to 4:20, like 20 minutes that they're saying that this happened. 3:51 to 4:19, there's nothing going on. So wouldn't that make more? Are you going to be calling and texting during? But they're from 4:19. Oh, I guess that's after. Okay,
Yep.
so
4:19's after.
3:51 to 4. Okay.
Because Dylan supposedly got up a few times, according to the witness statement, right? That she got up and went to her door a couple times, and so probably at that point she's like, what's going on out here? Again, we're going to talk about what we thought happened at the very end. We're almost there. But it wasn't until after the ruckus stopped that the texting started. That's,
calling all the roommates like they did, understandable.
Sure.
Not doing something after not getting responses, at least go look. At least have someone else go look. I mean, how many times have I called somebody over?
I know.
Because I don't want to be the one to go look, but you can go look, and then we'll make the decision what we need to do from there.
Right.
Right.
But who was their go look person?
Well, the next morning it was
no. Like in that moment, who would be the go look person?
I don't know. Dylan had a boyfriend. I think Bethany they both had boyfriends. They were in sororities. They were friends with fraternities who were a 3-minute walk away.
Yeah, true. So maybe they should have called
lots
one of those
neighbors
people, or the guy that was in the house. Hey, dude, come out
Well,
here.
he was
What's
one of the people, although they only called him once.
which was interesting.
Yeah.
I thought there would be, because knowing you and your
That's
reaction,
who I would want to get.
that's who you'd be
Yeah,
calling,
that's
right?
who I would
Give me
get.
the 6'4", right?
Yeah,
6'4" dude,
yeah.
and have him go walk around.
Yeah,
See what's
what's going
on.
on?
Yeah,
What's going
yeah.
on? What's going on? So all those calls to the roommates, understandable. It's conflicting to see the appearance of worried and frantic calls that appear to be checking, and then times where I'm just scrolling on Instagram. And it seems like in the beginning there's worry and concern, and then there's a long 8 hours of nothing, just scrolling and things like that. And then and what was interesting to me is new people. Like the texting wasn't just between Dylan and Bethany. There's these new people being, and parents. I think the parents were so what do you think about the parents being called?
Well, it's not just the parents. I want to let you finish your thought, but you are just speaking my language right now, because my final thoughts on this are going to be exactly what you're talking about. So,
well, let's go there.
all right. I do believe so. The first part of this, the PCA, I think it's okay. It wasn't a perfect document, but they had enough information to get the warrant, right? Which at the end of the day, even this judge has said, they probably, and you even mentioned, it doesn't need to be 18 pages. His DNA was on the button snap. Can we get, and just leave it at that, right? Why not just do that? So
I'm just going to chime in here because we are going to do a whole nother episode on that. But the issue with that is there was other, some would say, more relevant DNA in the house that never got tested.
Yeah.
So they left a lot of things out.
Yeah.
They picked and chose what they wanted for that.
Yeah, it got tested. It did get tested. I have to make that point every single time, that they wouldn't know if it was an unknown
Not
male.
identified.
Thank you.
Okay, so no, that's what I mean when I say that. Okay, it's like
all right.
unidentified. They
that,
did not identify.
No,
them.
that's what she means when she says that.
Okay.
That they did.
I think they do know
test.
that.
Okay,
all right. I say that.
Well, I'm just concerned that they didn't follow through with the investigation. That's all.
Yes.
Yeah, and they did. So, but okay, so the PCA aside, I think, and whether she was woken up at 4:00 or anything, all that, how the murder took place, and did she see him, did she not, and all that we've speculated on a million times. I think what happened afterwards, to have some more context about what happened afterwards, is a examination of the human psyche, in my opinion. That I wouldn't react that way, but I see elements, like you and I wouldn't react the same way if something happened here.
No, we've had instances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I know, and I've seen from your perspective how you would react, and whether that's gender based or age based or whatever, personality. I mean, there's so many factors, but this is truly an examination of the human psyche. And to me, I just feel like afterwards they were freaked out. Dylan and Bethany were freaked out. I think they thought something happened, but nothing happened, in my opinion, in front of them. Like, they may have heard things like, I'm here to help you, and rumbling upstairs, and people falling down or whatever, but they never saw anything, supposedly, right? So now your mind is left to what's going on. There's a dude in my house. There's always dudes in my house, but why was this one wearing a mask, only not covering his eyes, and maybe the bridge of his nose or something? And so she goes into this, what's going on? No one's responding to me except for one roommate. That roommate's probably a little bit more oblivious to what's going on.
Right. She was more removed.
Yeah. So now one roommate is at a high heightened, like, what the heck's going on in here? The other one's like, what's up? And no one's answering. And then the roommate who's, Bethany's like, what's going on? I'll try to go, well, they're not, okay. So roommate one, Dylan, is getting Bethany kind of fired up. Bethany's like, do you need to be at level 10? Because I didn't hear anything. Shouldn't you be at 5? So she's like, come to my room. And this is where I almost bring you into it, right? You will take something on occasion that is small and make it a 10.
Mm.
You'll take a 10 sometimes and be like, it's not that big. And what happens is, and maybe in those situations, they're comforting each other in a sense that, Dylan, calm down. It's okay. They were drunk, right? Because that was the first narrative we heard on the 911 call, which we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're drunk. They're passed out. Just let them be. And like, no, I'm telling you, there was some dude with the bushy eyebrows, in black. And, well, Xana was wearing black, I mean, could you have,
right.
I mean,
it does sound like that.
So it's almost like they're trying to bring someone down and someone's trying to elevate somebody's, be aware because something's happening in here. And I think there was a lot of that going on to the point where they convinced each other that it wasn't tragic. And at some point they were like, all right, I'm tired of having this dialogue with you about this. I'm calling my mom. I'm calling my dad. I'm running this past somebody who can help me make sense of what I think is going on. That's my personal opinion. I think the later calls when the parents got involved, because you as a parent would be like, call 911 first, and apologize to the police if it's nothing, then not calling and find out what's going on. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think was kind of taking place that moment. There were two people trying to talk each other down or up in this situation, and they spent most of the time doing it. And when they felt comfortable, okay, I'll go on with my life. I'll charge my phone. I'll get on Snapchat, and I'll look at things and, and do that. And then when they start freaking each other out again, it's like, all right, I'm going to call my dad. I think that's my personal opinion.
Could be.
How about you?
Plausible. So, well, there's a couple things. So first of all, Ann Taylor, the defense attorney, did say that both those girls were in that house all night. Okay. So there's been a lot of speculation about that. Like, were they even there?
The hotel.
We can put the
hotel to rest.
Hallelujah. Well, I mean, she did say. Now she could be saying that because that's what the prosecution's been saying, but she doesn't want to show her cards, but she did say that. We're definitely missing the context around Bethany's giving a response to Xana was wearing all black without there being a question or a statement leading to that. So it's got to be more information, maybe about exactly what was seen and heard that night.
That was my speculation.
Yeah. So it could be that. I could go with what you were saying up until being awake and being concerned. To me, they were clearly concerned with all those texts and phone calls and then not doing something. I don't care how scared you are. Like, you would have to, if you're too afraid to leave your room to go check yourself or have somebody come over, then like you said, call for help from the authorities and apologize for it later.
I agree.
But it wasn't like one of them wasn't answering you. All of them were not answering you.
All of them but one for each of them.
So that was weird, but I think there's more to it. I think Dylan has found herself in some positions where she's really going to get raked through it with information that was given, not given, what's come out here, all these names. And it appears a lot of weird apps were used for communication. Because like when they say like, oh, you're on LinkedIn or you're on Yik Yak, and you can communicate with people through all those, like just messaging services. So that appears like you're hiding things. And I don't know if it's in a document, but I think it might have been mentioned that things were deleted off the phone, but they still exist in the cloud. So then that leans towards, like, what do they call that when you feel guilty about something? So you're trying to remove things. We know for a fact the defense wants Bethany to testify for them. They've been saying since the beginning that she has exculpatory evidence, that she knows things that are specific to her, that I feel like she's going to contradict something that Dylan is saying. I don't know what, maybe the events, maybe, I don't know. It's going to be something, because why would it be for the defense? That's a big question. What does she know? That's what I was thinking. What does she know? Is it who was in the house that night? Was it more than one person? Because that's another topic we're going to talk about, is the alternative suspects. It's got to be something big that she knows that she's going to be able to speak to.
Do you think there's any in those text messages, anything that's a hint to what that exculpatory stuff could be?
I think that Dylan knows. Like, I think she knows who did it. I think she knows. My personal opinion. And I think she was threatened. I think she's like a victim in this too. Like, I think she was used in certain ways.
So you think Dylan knows? You think Dylan told Bethany why they were in the room together, and Bethany could be able to come and testify and say, you know, during the 6-8 hours that we were alone together, Dylan told me that she thinks this person did something?
I think Bethany was oblivious and witnessed what Dylan was doing with communications, and Bethany might have been able to look out her window and see more than one person. I just think she just knows different information.
Oh, okay.
Than what is trying to be portrayed by the one. They only used Dylan in the PCA. They didn't use Bethany. You know, why not? Well, because
who do you think released the information that said, because I thought it was a defense, but it could have been the prosecution. But who released the information that said that Dylan said, I could be lying or I could be a dream? Who released that information to the public? Because the public knows that information now. So something to that effect has been stated. It was in her
interview. So the defense released it because they probably got a hold of her interviews.
Okay.
So they write down, you know, they have the interview transcribed.
Okay. So I guess the point is, you know, maybe not specifically the words, but I think she gives herself an out to say, I don't know if this is a dream. I don't know if this is a lie. I don't know, you know, because I was so confused. I was drunk, you know, I mean, you're trying to hold me to specifics that I don't think I can hold myself to.
I heard today someone read from that and she said, I don't even know. I don't even think I saw a face. Well, how did you see eyebrows if you didn't see a face?
Just like
your eyebrows are on your face.
Just like Billy Idol. Eyes without a face.
Here's our new
Every time they talk about Goldberger's eye, I think of that song, Eyebrows Without a Face. Yeah, come on, Billy Idol.
Hate Billy
I know
Idol,
you hate Billy Idol. That's why I wanted to quote it. All right. So to put a wrap on this, I guess, and we have 7 other topics.
Yes.
Of things like this that we've kind of scratched the surface on and talked a little bit about. I like working them out here instead of privately, you know. So I like this format. I like to get in the 7 others. Do we know what's going to be next on the list, or should we just
I think we
make it a
put
surprise?
I think we put Cy-Ray as number 2.
Oh, that's a big
with
one.
the AT&T timing data and all that.
That
his
might be a long.
testimony.
That might be a long one
It
because
could be a good long
you
one.
and I had it out on Cy-Ray, didn't
Yeah.
we?
I think there were tears involved, you guys.
Mine.
No. I get mean. But,
she's better at fighting than I am. She's good at it. She's good at it. But that one was intense. But I think there's a lot of strong information there both ways.
well, especially what just happened in the hearing and the way the judge
Mhm.
is acting about it. So
And if there's anything that has pushed me a little bit closer to center, instead of, a guilter, it's kind of the Cy-Ray stuff a little bit. So I'm
yeah.
curious. It seemed like it was a nuclear bomb that went off, when he wrote his little affidavit or big affidavit. It didn't land the way I thought it was going to land, but it still caused some casualties. So I'm still interested to debate it a little bit more, but
We're going to discuss that one next time.
Yep.
For sure. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you will join us back for that one. And please make sure to subscribe if you haven't. We are trying to continue on our journey to 1,000 subscribers.
We're gonna actually put a countdown. We should do something.
We need a countdown timer.
For that 1,000. But we need 1,000 subscribers.
We're trying to get there, and your support means a lot. So if you enjoy our videos, please support us that way. We would appreciate it greatly. And we'll see you here next time.
Yeah, and love to read your comments. So
Yes.
just drop them down there. Even if you bash me, I can take it.
All right. We'll see you then.
All right. Bye.
Bye.